For centuries, the truckers have kept the worlds of the Estuary Cluster connected. Long years, hard years, but proud years. Trucking is a way of life, even if it ends in a trucker's wake. Now, corporate shipping lines want to take over the space lanes. Canaveral Station is blockaded, rigs impounded, and crews in the slammer. Seems like all that's left to do is to hold a wake for the trucker's very own way of life. Unless that is the premise of Traveler Cluster Truck from Mongoose Publishing, and I'll share my review right after this. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I'll be sharing my review of Traveler Cluster Truck from Mongoose Publishing. This 160-page hardcover with PDF is available now, carries an MSRP of $49.99. If you want to make sure you get that PDF absolutely free, be sure to order from Mongoose Publishing. Now, if you only want to grab the PDF, you can do so over at DriveThruRPG for $29.99. Having said all that, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Traveler Cluster Truck. A few things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Mongoose Publishing were kind enough to provide me with this review copy. But neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. It's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a good feel for what you're going to find inside. And then lastly, this is an adventure campaign for Traveler. So if your game master has picked up Cluster Truck, maybe just haven't started running it yet, maybe they've been talking about picking this up. Keep in mind, there are some minor spoilers ahead, and as I flip through the book, it is entirely possible you see some things which will ruin some of the surprises of the campaign, so I'm just letting you know that right up front. Now, of course, if your game master has been kicking around picking this up, let them know about this review. That way they can approach this and make a far more informed buying decision. First thing we'll do is take a peek at the credits page. A lot of folks work very hard to bring this to life. So let's give credit where credit is due. Cluster Truck is a new campaign for the Traveler science fiction role-playing game. And I will say this has a completely different tone, different style, different overall vibe than our tried and true Traveler adventures and campaigns. This tends to be more personal in nature. It is kind of a smaller story, and it's a lighter story. There's a lot of humor that's present in Cluster Truck. I think the title of the campaign itself probably gives that away. Now, in this, the players are going to take on the roles of fledgling truckers in the Estuary Cluster, which is the backwoods of charted space. And up until this point, none of the major factions in charted space have really taken much notice of the cluster until now. I'm not going to ruin that spoiler, but there are some interests who want to come on in and change the way of life in the Estuary Cluster. So the player characters are fledgling truckers who are just essentially trying to get by. They are individuals who have found themselves stuck in the backwoods of charted space, and they're looking for a way to get off planet. And the main way to do so is to take part in this contest to see who could be the next crew for a trucking rig. And then we go from there. So we're going to start off the book with information about the Estuary Cluster. We get far more information about the planets a little further in. bit of information how trucking works. You're utilizing different rigs. They are smaller spaceships. They tend to be barely hanging together. They're pretty much jury rigged. Tech level is tech level 8 for the most part throughout the cluster. You might be able to find some things that are tech level 9, but nothing is cutting edge by any stretch of the imagination. And much of the equipment that's in use is recycled from pieces of other equipment out there. So low tech kind of vibe to the proceedings here. As far as the production quality of the book, really nice. Nice solid paper stock. It's got a stitched binding. Artwork throughout is solid, maybe not necessarily spectacular, but still good, nice artwork. So production quality throughout is great. It really is. This is going to be a very solid book. As Game Master's not going to have to worry about this falling apart right away at the game table. Now, as far as what else is in the book here, we're going to get some information about trucking itself. And I got to say, I was kind of surprised because this is kind of a lighter campaign. This isn't our traditional sort of Third Imperium adventuring, which is great. I love that. In fact, I'm impressed by what Mongoose Publishing is looking to do with Traveller with some of their more recent releases, kind of taking the game in different directions. Now, that doesn't mean that you're still not going to get your tried and true Traveller adventures that you've grown to know and love. Of course, you're still seeing that. But like this is, truckers. And then we also have the latest campaign that's out, at least in PDF, where the player characters are rockers on tour. And then there is the newest, which is on pre-order right now. The PDF's out, but the hardcover book is on pre-order, Singularity, where the player characters, at least it seems, I haven't really taken a deep dive into it. It seems that they're like agents of change for this alien godlike being. Very, very cool to see things kind of branch out a little bit as far as Traveller storytelling goes. Also want to mention that the deck plans, artwork for the ships and that, really nicely done. We get a lot of new ships. We do have these smaller rigs, which are essentially made for hauling cargo or transporting cargo. So you're going to have that at the beginning of the book. Well, like I said, as you can see, we get a lot of new information here as far as new equipment, new ships, and a new cluster, new system for the players and their characters to explore. So, of course, we're going to get into the nitty gritty about each of the planets, which make up the system. There are 10 planets. Not all of them are of major interest. Like I said, this is the backwoods. This is kind of the fringe of charted space in some ways. Then we're going to dive on into our campaign, and I'm going to try to stay as spoiler-free as I possibly can. We're going to get some information about important factions, movers and shakers in the cluster, and then important NPCs that the player characters are going to encounter. And they're going to kick off, as I mentioned before, the player characters are stuck on this planet. They're looking to get off planet. Of course, it's completely up to the players how their characters arrived in this situation. And one of the ways to do so is to become a trucker. And there is the Junk Boat Derby, which is a contest to find out, who's qualified to be a trucking crew. And then the campaign goes from there as the player characters are looking to prove their mettle to the various different independent truckers out there. And of course, there are various different factions at work as well. So essentially, the corporate shipping are really aiming to make a dent in the independents and essentially try to take over much of the shipping that's taking place within the cluster. There's also a major faction that wants to come in and annex the cluster. So there's something there as well. As I pointed out, this has kind of a humorous take to it. So, as a game master, if you were looking to run this, I would certainly recommend giving some of these late 1970s, early 1980s, good old boy sort of movies a watch, like Breaker Breaker, Convoy. Both of those are specifically about trucking. Even Smokey and the Bandit, there's kind of smuggling going on there with Coors beer. And those movies should give you a good feel for the tone of this campaign. Now, talking about tone, I am kind of surprised. There's an event that takes place. It is a major event in this campaign. It's pretty somber. It's pretty serious. And I was kind of surprised by its inclusion because it kind of changes the vibe of things, at least for a little bit. And I think that's going to change the tone at your game table, at least for a little while, as this campaign continues. I do like what happens. I think it's interesting and I think it nicely moves things along, but just the tone of it kind of threw me off a little bit. Now, this is also supposed to be a campaign that's going to be light on violence. Using lethal weapons is frowned upon. Most of the places that the truckers are going to be traveling to will not allow various different weapons. Some don't allow any weapons at all, even melee weapons. So keep that in mind. A lot of the action, a lot of the combat that's going to take place is going to be more of the hand-to-hand kind of brawls and riots breaking out sort of action as opposed to gunfights or starship combat. So the campaign's going to continue along. The players are going to prove their worth to the other truckers. And then there's a big attempt to save the truckers' way of life, at least as far as things operate in the Estuary Cluster. And that is a peek inside the Traveler Campaign Cluster Truck from Mongoose Publishing. Let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts as well as my review score. As I previously mentioned, I love the fact that Mongoose Publishing is moving in different directions with Traveler. That doesn't mean you won't continue to see those tried and true Traveler adventures and campaigns you love, but we are seeing some things that are a little bit different in scale and tone and even genre. Cluster Truck draws inspiration from those good old boy TV shows and movies of the 1970s and 80s. Pretty interesting take. This is also a bit lighter hearted than most Traveler adventures, a little more personal in scope as well. And it's supposed to be a pretty humorous tone overall, which actually leads to my biggest critique about this campaign. Traveler adventures tend to be more of a sandbox. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not linear, but what normally will happen is certain situations, challenges will come up that the player characters need to face, and the players come up with various ideas on how to overcome those things. So in most Traveler adventures, it's not just laid out that, okay, so the players need to do this and they need to roll this number and they need, no, it's pretty open-ended. But throughout this campaign, there's mention of trying to make a certain scene or encounter humorous or lighter in tone. And then there's nothing there as far as advice to the game master. So it's kind of like I'm being told to tell you a joke, but I don't know any jokes. And I find that a little bit disappointing. I would have liked to have seen more advice in various different situations, encounters, and set pieces throughout this campaign to help me make this lighter in tone. And then there's also a serious event that takes place midway through the campaign, which is very important. I do like the event. It just throws off the tone right in the middle of the campaign. So if I'm supposed to be making this kind of funny, kind of like, oh, hey, it's every which way but loose in space, and then you kind of drop this downer in the middle of it, it's kind of a little unusual. But having said that, I still think this is a cool campaign, and I have to give kudos to Mongoose Publishing for doing something different. This isn't your typical traditional traveler adventures or campaigns, which I actually enjoy, don't get me wrong. But I love the fact that we've got a bit of a smaller scale story here. So, like I said, like the campaign, I think the premise is great. I wish I had more advice from the authors about how to light things up and make things funnier, as opposed to, well, we don't have gun battles, we don't have big battles in space. Whenever fights break out, it's just brawls. That's about all we get. But all in all, I still recommend Cluster Truck. I like it. Like I said, I just wish there was more advice on how to keep things light and maybe more examples of humorous situations like we would see in a paranoia adventure book or campaign. So, on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Traveler Cluster Truck from Mongoose Publishing a 7 out of 10. All right, that is it for this time out. If you enjoy the Gaming Gang and would like to support the outlet, you can do so in a few ways. First, by utilizing our affiliate links to the One Bookshelf sites, such as DriveThruRPG. To do so, simply visit thegaminggang.com, click on one of our banner ads. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get 5% commission on most sales. Now, of course, if you'd like to make a one-time donation by way of PayPal, you certainly can do that. And you can become a monthly member of our Patreon. You'll find all of that information down in the show notes. Also in those show notes, you're going to find an invite link to our Discord server. It's absolutely free to sign up, so be sure to hang with the gang over on Discord. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, be sure to ring that bell. And when you ring the bell, select all notifications, because that way YouTube is supposed to not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central, right here on YouTube. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are never going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you kindly for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and until I see you next time, certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.